Paul Thomas Anderson. It's a big task to wrap your arms around a filmmaker that is this significant, who has a filmography that's this vast, and do it all in a single video, but that's what I'm going to be attempting here as I rank all 10 of his feature-length films. While he might not have the name recognition or the commercial success of some of his contemporaries like Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino, he is still widely considered to be one of the greatest living filmmakers. You could argue that he has the greatest filmography of all time, honestly. There's not a lot of lows, and the highs are some of the highest that I have ever seen personally. Because it's so consistent but also so tonally varied, this list might piss some people off, and I'd like to reiterate that he has never made a bad movie. Even the films that are near the bottom of this list have tons of artistic merit. So all that to say, don't get mad at me if one of your favorites isn't one of mine. Just drop your list in the comments. Let me know why I'm wrong, all that stuff. I'll try my best to articulate my opinions, but I'm not trying to convince anyone that my list is definitive or unanimously agreed upon. I'm not entirely sure if I will even agree with my list in like a month or two. So with that being said, let's just dive straight into this with the number 10 pick. Hard Eight is Paul's first feature film, and for better or worse, it feels like it. This is definitely the work of a filmmaker that's trying to figure out what sort of movies he wants to make, what kind of stories he wants to tell, how he wants to write dialogue, how he wants to use the camera, how he wants to stage and block sequences. There's a lot of feeling things out here, and at his advent, PTA is naturally gifted at certain aspects of filmmaking and clearly struggles with others. Let's start with some of the good stuff. The camera work here is already masterful. All of the moving through the casino floors and the streets of Reno stuff is magical. There is a lot of energy and confidence to the way that he chooses to follow his characters through a given space. I also love the very quick edit of the first act. We're really getting into the process of bedding. You can feel a very specific Altman film heavily influencing each of his first three films, and Hard Eight is definitely his attempt at making his version of California Split, which is one of my favorite Altman films. That is definitely most clear within the first 30 or so minutes. The primary issue here is the dialogue and the actual plot. There's some really cringy line deliveries here, and there's also a few one-liners that are supposed to be effortlessly cool but end up just falling flat. I think Gwyneth Paltrow is maybe one of the best performances in this entire movie, but her character is so underwritten that it kind of goes to waste. And maybe it's because I most know him for his comedic stuff, but I think it's really hard for me to take John C. Reilly seriously in this movie. There's also a third act twist that I completely forgot about, and this time around found to be quite stupid. The kind of twist that you would never see coming because there's like no breadcrumbs earlier in the film to lead the viewer to that conclusion, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it really takes me out of the movie. It's entertaining the whole way through, and is significant largely because it lays the groundwork for everything PTA would go on to do. But in the grander scheme of both 80s crime films and Paul's own filmography, I would say it's a pretty minor work. This might be the placement that gets me in the most trouble. There seems to be a pretty die-hard fan base for Inherent Vice that has come out of the woodworks in the past few years and are heralding it as this misunderstood masterpiece. And frankly, I just cannot get on board with that sentiment at all. There's certainly some good stuff here, but it's undeniably messy and, at least for me, really frustrating to watch. Much like the work of Thomas Pynchon, the author whose novel this film is adapting, there's a chaotic ADHD nature to this narrative that just kind of irritates me. It's the film equivalent of like a 6-year-old running around and throwing everything in sight, and you just want it to at some point reach a conclusion or culminate into something great, but it just keeps spiraling down and growing more and more incomprehensible. It goes down rabbit holes within rabbit holes, tangents within tangents, and ultimately I'm left wondering what the hell the point of all of it is. And that lack of point might be the message of the film. This incomprehensibility is probably intentional, and usually I enjoy films that allow the viewer to draw their own interpretation, especially when there's so much to interpret. But movies like that have to be entertaining enough to warrant rewatch, and Inherent Vice just isn't that fun to me. 2.5 hours is a long time to not know what the hell is going on. PTA is usually great at comedy, and this is a concept that's rich with humor. But for whatever reason, whether it be the tone or the timing or the performance styles, very few jokes land for me. There's some performances I wish there was more of, notably Josh Brolin and Benicio, but because the film keeps jumping around from plot point to plot point, these characters don't get fleshed out enough to make much of an impact. As I'm talking about this, I'm realizing I personally like it a little less than Hard Eight, but it's higher on the list because there's not a ton of obvious flaws. A lot of this boils down to my own personal taste and the kind of PTA I like, and that kind of PTA is just largely absent from Inherent Vice. Licorice Pizza is Anderson's ninth feature film, and the first one I witnessed the release of in real time and saw in the theaters opening weekend. Because of that, my initial reaction to this film was largely positive, but as I've sat with it and after a couple of rewatches, it's become more and more difficult to ignore its flaws. In his filmography, this is probably most comparable to Punch Drunk Love because it's loose and it's centered around an unlikely romance, and we'll get to Punch Drunk Love much later on in this ranking, but the main distinction is that that film is efficient in its storytelling, and Licorice Pizza feels a lot more sprawling and expansive. It's shockingly episodic, and while there's occasionally some interesting connective tissue between those sequences, the majority of entertainment value stems from whether or not you enjoy a given episode. They're quite a mixed bag. The Sean Penn and Tom Waits stuff does nothing for me aside from a visually cool motorcycle shot. The Benny Safdie stuff works in the context of Alana as a character, realizing the lack of maturity within the world around her, but it's placed right after the absolutely electric Bradley Cooper truck going down the hill sequence, which is just so much fun that the following events sort of pale in comparison. I really like the two leads, especially Cooper Hoffman, who is exceptionally charming and I hope reunites with PTA at some point. But to address the elephant in the room, the age gap is a little bit off-putting, especially in the scenes where Alana is like trying to make Gary jealous. And the ending seems to trivialize the age gap as if it doesn't really matter that this relationship is technically illegal as long as they like each other. I don't know, the first time I didn't think twice about it, largely because both characters are equal measures of mature and childish, so they kind of feel like they're on the same level. But with each rewatch, it's bothered me a little bit more. Ultimately, I think Licorice Pizza is a bunch of really good sequences that are barely held together into cohesive narrative, but are at least somewhat held together by the quality of the lead performances. It's fun, but it's also the PTA film that I probably think the least about. This is when the quality of this guy's filmography starts to really show. If almost any other filmmaker made Magnolia, it would be one of the crowning moments of their career, but somehow PTA has made 6 movies I think are better than this. Let's start with the nitpicks. The second act is like 90 minutes long, and the music and the edit keeps ratcheting up the tension for a straight hour as each plotline reaches its climax. But some of them need more space, and some of them reach their climax quicker than others, so these plotlines kind of stagnate while the other ones rush. Tom Cruise stares judgmentally at a reporter for 30 minutes. The game show goes on air, then off air, and then back on again. Julianne Moore screams at like 3 or 4 different people in completely different locations, and Philip Seymour Hoffman is on hold, all in the exact same amount of time. I'm sure it's difficult to sync up 7 different plot lines into one single narrative, and for the most part PTA pulls it off, but the middle section is where the cracks start to show just a bit. Luckily the third act is such a showstopper that it doesn't really matter. My final complaint is that this film is occasionally so melodramatic it's hard to take seriously. I love Julianne Moore, but these meltdowns are comically over the top, and I've always found the sing-along sequence to be super corny. It feels like PTA is getting a bit too self-indulgent. It's interesting to compare this to Shortcuts, the Altman film that heavily influences Magnolia, because they're in theory very similar, but in execution couldn't be more different. Shortcuts is loose and largely unconcerned with narrative or thematic connective tissue between its characters, and Magnolia is tight and meticulously structured and tries very hard to wrap itself up in a neat little bow. I'm not saying I prefer one over the other, just saying it's interesting how Anderson takes a lot of Altman's style and storytelling and recontextualizes it to fit his own sensibilities as a filmmaker. Now on to the good stuff. This film contains like 3 or 4 career best performances from some absolute legends. Tom Cruise is tearing this movie up. Frank Mackey feels like a commentary on his own movie star persona, this hyper-masculine, uber-magnetic charisma machine that has an almost superhuman amount of energy but is clearly using these skills for nefarious purposes. As somebody who's always found Cruise unconvincing and a tad unsettling in his more conventional leading man roles, this part really stands out, especially the onstage meltdown and that final reunion with his father. John C. Reilly is a standout too, serving as the moral compass of the film and the only character who really understands the significance of forgiveness, which is a clear central theme here. The dinner scene, specifically the "I lost my gun" monologue, is just incredible stuff. It's kind of futile to explain everything great about Magnolia in such a short time because it's so sprawling and such a dense piece of filmmaking. So I'll just end with this. Magnolia feels like one of the most talented filmmakers in the world trying to accomplish something that has never been done before, and mostly succeeding, even if he does get a bit self-indulgent along the way. It's an intimidating movie, one that feels more and more complex with each rewatch, but it's also so energetic that it never feels like a chore to get through. And it's really crazy that I had to put it this low, but that's just the amount of great films he's made. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum from Magnolia, PTA's 8th feature film, Phantom Thread, is, at least to me, characterized by its small scale and near flawless execution. There's only 3 major characters here. Most of it takes place in the same location, and the closest it gets to a set piece is Daniel Day-Lewis making a dress or driving to go get a ludicrously gargantuan breakfast. I've noticed in my rewatches that Paul deals in extremes, at least in terms of his ambitions. He's either making one of the biggest undertakings in modern American filmmaking, or it's just like a few people talking in a room. It's a testament to his versatility and talent that I really can't decide which kind of PTA I like more. But anyway, back to Phantom Thread. One of the most gorgeous films in his filmography, the only movie where he holds the sole cinematographer credit too. Each shot is dripping with texture and luxury and poise. It's patient and it feels a bit more restrained than his other works, both in its style and substance, but there's still moments where it explodes into extravagance. In line with many great period pieces, it's using its setting to explore deep emotions that are being pushed down, people trying to remain appropriately composed but ultimately erupting anyways. And this film has a bunch of emotions boiling over moments that are equal parts intense and hilarious. The Vicky Krieps, Daniel Day-Lewis chemistry is off the charts, both romantically and comedically. The dinner scene is one of the best moments in any PTA movie, period. I'd also be remiss here to not mention the Jonny Greenwood score, which is doing a lot of stylistic heavy lifting here. It turns the scenes of Woodcock at work into something almost transcendental, watching a true artist make something that he was born to make. Like any good score, it's elevating the emotions of the scene without telegraphing the way the viewer is supposed to feel. That's the other thing about Phantom Thread and a lot of late PTA in general. It leaves a lot up to the viewer's interpretations by just presenting these two characters and allowing the audience to decide who's in the right and who's in the wrong, and if there even is a right or wrong in the first place. I was initially put off by the whole poison thing, but upon rewatch, it feels like the natural endpoint for this relationship to take, and it's really fascinating to watch Day-Lewis come to that realization in real time. That scene is remarkable. There's just so much left unsaid, and I think the ambiguity makes this film more rewatchable. Now you might be wondering where the criticism is, what my reasoning for putting this at the bottom half of the list is, and the truth is there's not a lot I dislike about Phantom Thread. It's a visual and auditory feast with 2 mesmerizing leads and a really great sense of humor and romance. That's what's so crazy. This guy might have 6 perfect movies, at least in my opinion. So I'll just end by saying Phantom Thread absolutely rules, but for whatever reason, and hopefully I can explain myself in the following rankings, I just like 5 other PTA movies better. PTA's sophomore debut, Boogie Nights, is the moment that he arrives as a true master filmmaker, and he was only 27 years old. I already did a video on this, so if you want to hear some more in-depth analysis, check that one out. I'm going to keep this one pretty brief because, it's Boogie Nights. Do I really need to explain why Boogie Nights is a masterpiece? An all-time Mark Wahlberg performance. Every supporting character is fully realized. Even if they just have a couple of scenes, the energy is electric, the needle drops are all-timers. It's just incredible, and that's enough said. I'll finish by talking about Robert Altman for the third and final time here, and briefly explain what I believe to be the first era of PTA's career, made up by his 3 films in the 90s, where he's drawing heavily from Altman and getting super ambitious, and for better or worse, long-winded in his runtimes. Hard 8 is his California Split, Magnolia is his Shortcuts, Boogie Nights is his Nashville. But these films being iterative or heavily influenced by others don't diminish their quality because PTA makes them his own, bringing his own spin to them, adding his singular sense of humor, his unmatched energy, his unrelenting pace, and turning these relaxed and plotless Altman influences into tight, non-stop pieces of entertainment. It's remarkable that on just his second try, Anderson is not only matching the quality of his influences, he's arguably exceeding them. Is it crazy to put One Battle After Another, a movie that came out 2 weeks ago, above stuff like Boogie Nights and Magnolia that have been cemented for 3 decades as irrefutable classics? Maybe, but I'm betting in a few years' time we'll be talking about One Battle After Another in the same breath as PTA's best. I guess I already am by putting it this high. This is another one I already did a video on, and I'll just reiterate what I said in that one. This is simultaneously an amalgamation of everything he's done in his career and on a scale and a budget that he's never been given before. It has the energy of Boogie Nights, the overarching thematic depth of There Will Be Blood, the humor of Punch Drunk Love, the remarkable Greenwood score of Phantom Thread, the Pinchonian sensibilities of Inherent Vice, and I guess the Alana Haim of Licorice Pizza. Through the synthesis of all these versions of Anderson comes this completely new vision of what he's capable of as a filmmaker. Something that is as accessible and entertaining as any modern blockbuster, with a thematic depth and social relevancy and riskiness to its storytelling that the majority of big budget films from the past decade so desperately lack. Basically, it's one of the best movies of the past few years, and if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it on the biggest screen possible. There Will Be Blood is probably the best movie of the 21st century, so it's almost automatically the best PTA movie. I'm not entirely sure if it's my favorite. but it's almost certainly the most impressive and quote-unquote important film that I'll talk about. You have the best performance from one of the greatest to ever do it right in the center of this thing. DDL is riveting, he's hilarious, he's terrifying, he's vile and somewhat sympathetic, and just holds the screen in a way that no other performer ever has. From that opening monologue to the final "I'm finished," he's at the top of his game, which is saying a lot because this movie is quite long, just 2 hours and 40 minutes, and unlike One Battle, which flies by, you feel the runtime here, but in a good way. I mean that you feel the scale, you feel the weight, you feel each sequence and scene and moment. It's a lot of movie, but it's more than worth it, and that propulsive Johnny Greenwood score keeps the energy up and keeps me engrossed in everything going on here. The oil rig on fire scene is awe-inspiring, and at that point in the film, we're just getting started. It also features the best ending of any PTA film. Dano and Day-Lewis absolutely losing it, finally letting everything loose. It's so cathartic and intense while having this signature Anderson sense of humor that elevates his films from important to genuinely entertaining. This is probably the one that's going to get people the most pissed off, but I don't care. I love Punch Drunk Love. It's incredibly important to me and one of the movies that got me into film. And on top of that, it's truly remarkable. The kind of movie that only PTA could make. An art house rom-com starring Adam Sandler about pudding cups and mattress men that is somehow one of the most beautiful films about love of the 21st century. Just some context, this is his fourth film overall and his first film in the 2000s. He was just coming off Boogie Nights and Magnolia and decided he wanted to do something small, simple, to the point. And the result, Punch Drunk Love, is a tight 90 minutes, never wastes a single second, and fuses his genres and tones together seamlessly. Sandler is a huge part of that. His character is not the most likable guy in the world, but his yearning for love and connection is relatable enough to make him sympathetic. And if anything, this is a movie about how much love can change a person. By the end of the film, he's turned into someone else entirely, someone who's vulnerable and confident and can channel that inner frustration and anger into something that's at least semi-productive. Now that I'm thinking about it, Barry Egan might just be PTA's best protagonist. And a quick mention to the blue suit, which really ties the whole character together. Since this is a very personal pick, I thought I'd talk about it from a very personal lens and just describe some of my specific personal favorite moments and aspects of this film. One, the chaotic avant-garde score playing all over the office scenes that really places you into Barry's anxious emotional state. 2, the little monologue he delivers on the first date about the radio host he likes, which is for some reason kind of sad but also charming and really adorable. It's like see him let his guard down for the first time. 3, everything Philip Seymour Hoffman is doing. He's an all-time yeller doing some of his best yelling. 4, the part where Emily Watson just looks at him while he sits on the bed in his robe looking kind of dopey. 5, when he says it sure looks like Hawaii here as he's looking at Hawaii. 6, the part where Luis Guzman gets super excited that he's going on vacation. The first time I saw it, I thought it was because he just wanted him to leave the office, but now it's pretty clear to me that he's just like genuinely excited that his friend is coming out of his shell. 7, the grocery store dance. 8, the way that PTA films the initial phone sex hotline scene. It's a long take that isn't showy in any way, but is fulfilling its purpose of making the audience sit in the loneliness that Barry feels. 9, the general way Emily Watson plays her character, who clearly knows that Barry is a weirdo, but seems to find it kind of endearing. Since it's all from Barry's perspective, she could have easily felt like a one-note romantic interest, but she imbues the character with tons of personality and charm and depth that makes this film all the better. And 10, He Needs Me, the best PTA needle drop hands down. I could go on, but we got one more movie to talk about, so I'll just say that this is the PTA movie I've rewatched the most, the one I recommend the most, and maybe his most entertaining film. It's an example of something outside of the film bro palette that his films usually provide, but still has all the things that make something uniquely Paul Thomas Andersonian. I'm surprised this landed at the number 1 spot, but frankly, the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. In a filmography full of classics, masterpieces, 10 out of 10 bangers, The Master is perhaps the most miraculous of them all, largely due to its elusive nature. With the majority of his films, you can boil their ideas down to a single sentence. Punch Drunk Love is about the power of finding someone you truly love. One Battle After Another is about being a father and worrying about the things you'll pass down to your kids. Magnolia is about forgiveness, or more often than not, the inability to forgive. There Will Be Blood is about capitalism and greed seeping into America, and etc., etc. I'm not going to do them all. The point being that you can't really do that with The Master. It's about Scientology and cults and the way that they take advantage of broken and susceptible people, but it's also about war and trauma and purpose and seeking meaning in life and this very masculine tendency to lash out in anger when that meaning can't be found. And it's also kind of about male friendship and codependency and alcoholism and mental illness and power and religion. And I'm just going to stop listing things now because it's getting kind of annoying, but what I'm trying to say is that The Master is dense. It's not necessarily complicated, it's just a lot. And PTA mines all of that out of a pretty simple premise. A man returning from war who gets caught up into the teachings of a cult leader. Even the camera work and the editing is simple. A great example is the processing scene. It's just a couple of medium close-ups and occasionally a, pardon the pun, master shot. But that scene is maybe the greatest in his entire filmography because you have two all-time greats delivering what I believe to be the best performances in their respective careers, which is saying a lot because PSH and Joaquin have been in some all-timers, but both of these performances really get at what makes these two so great. Joaquin is animalistic and visceral. He's always doing something with his body or his eyes and is always talking out of the side of his mouth and just generally making such bold choices in his characterization of Freddie Quill that it should come off as doing too much in terms of the physicality, but it doesn't because PTA is giving him the space and the material to go for it in a way that only Joaquin can. And he's also playing off such a subdued but equally powerful Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I just realized I've only mentioned a couple of times, but is irrefutably the most important actor in PTA's filmography. He is mesmerizing here. Lancaster Dodd is such a mystery to me, and Hoffman knows how to make the viewer lean in and focus on his performance without ever fully revealing the inner complexities of the character. There's still a lot of questions about Lancaster. Does he really believe the stuff he's saying? Is he really just like making it up as he goes along? Does he see something in Freddy, or is he just toying with him and like experimenting with this mentally unstable individual to see what he can discover about human psychology? I really have no idea, but each time I watch The Master, I arrive at a completely different conclusion. Like I mentioned with Phantom Thread, late career PTA is so great to me because he leaves so much up to the audience's interpretation. He's delving into some very complex, deep ideas, but never seems like he has a solid stance on them, which is a good thing. He's asking the questions without entirely answering them. It's what makes The Master and really every film he's ever made so thought-provoking and rewatchable. It always feels like there's some deeper meaning to explore, another rabbit hole to go down, another scene or moment or line of dialogue to dissect. The Master is, in short, a masterpiece, and I haven't even gotten to the technical aspects of it, arguably his most gorgeous-looking film, and it's edited so smoothly that the whole thing flows together like one coherent thought. And this is the last time I'll say this, I promise, but that Johnny Greenwood score absolutely rocks. So for those reasons, and many, many more, The Master is number one. And yeah, that was a lot. Rewatching all these films made me realize that PTA might just be the best filmmaker working today. Maybe I'm just riding the hype train right now because of one battle after another. I don't know. I've been talking for a while. I'll just wrap it up with this. Post your rankings below, even if you haven't seen every single one. Still love to see them. Let me know how wrong my list is. I'd love to argue about it and plead my case if you thought some of these movies were too high or too low or whatever. And that's it. Paul Thomas Anderson ranked. Done. Had a great time. Go watch One Battle After Another or really any of these movies. And I'll be coming back with another movie review or director ranking very soon. Bye-bye.